How to play Etude in A minor by Dionisio Aguado. And this is lesson 23 of the GCH Guitar Academy Fingerstyle guitar course. If you haven't heard the tune before, there's a link down below in the description that will take you to the tune being played a couple of times with a brief rundown of the composer. But here's the tune being played anyway. If you don't need to hear the tune, you can skip it using the YouTube chapters feature. If you've seen any of my previous videos about etudes, you'll know that an etude is actually a study. And this particular study is both very easy and very hard, which sounds like a paradox really, doesn't it? So let me explain that in more detail. The fingerpicking pattern for this study is primary, index, middle, index, which is one of the very first fingerpicking patterns we ever did, right the way back in lesson 1. So the fingerpicking pattern isn't difficult. And if you take any of the chords in this study, they're all pretty easy. There's no massive stretches or really complicated chords. So they're not too hard. Now, if we look at the speed and the time signature, this is where it gets a little more unusual. And the speed is only 65 beats per minute, which is relatively slow, so you'd think this would be easy. However, the time signature is 2/4 time, which is 2 crotchets in the bar. But you'll notice we're playing 8 notes in every bar, which means we're playing semiquavers, which are 1/4 of a crotchet or 1/4 of a beat. So you're aiming to play it pretty quickly, and this is where the complications come in, because now you have to change the chords very quickly, and it's quite difficult to get a smooth chord change at these speeds, and this is what you'll need to practice. However, because the fingerpicking pattern and the chords are fairly easy, anyone can play this tune. And what you do is you start very slowly and build up the speed. And this is where it becomes a study. Because if you're an absolute beginner, it might take you 6 months to get up to the full speed. Or if you're more advanced, it might only take you a couple of weeks. But whichever you are, you're going to have to practice this over a period of time in order to get it fast and smooth. But you don't put everything aside and concentrate on the study alone. You integrate them into your normal lessons or practice exercises. So you do your normal lessons or learn new tunes, and when you practice, just add the study on at the end, so it improves over time. And this is the nature of a good study. You have to spend some time on it in order to play it correctly. Right, before we get into the actual tune, let's take a look at the overall structure. And hopefully you've noticed that the first two lines are in repeats, and so are the second two lines. So you play the first two lines twice, and then you play the second two lines twice. However, the entire tune is repeated. So overall, you play each line 4 times. Now, because there's a lot of repeats, you can make it more interesting and also make the whole tune sound more emotional, so it gives a better emotional response to the listener by changing the tone on the repeats. So to do this, for example, you'd play the first 2 lines finger picking above the hole or even close to the frets, and then on the repeat you move your hand back towards the bridge and finger pick there, and you'll find it's got a different tone. And this brings variety and interest into the tune. To demonstrate this more clearly, I'll just play the first bar over and over again whilst moving the position of my picking hand. Another thing you can do to create more of an emotional impact by your music is to slow it down slightly and speed it back up again, and also to play passages louder and quieter. Now sometimes this is written down in the actual score. However, for the time being, I encourage you to experiment with this. But obviously you only start experimenting with this when you can play the tune fairly confidently. So now let's learn how to play it. How to play Etude in A minor by Dionisio Aguado. We'll start by looking at the complete first line. And this is because you're basically using one shape but moving it around. In the first bar, you place the first finger on the first fret of the B string and the second finger on the second fret of the G string. So you've got a 1-2 shape. And you'll notice for the second bar you've got this same shape but down a string, so that the first finger is on the G string and the second finger is on the D string. But when I play the second bar, I'll put the first finger down first and then the second finger down just before it's required, and this is just to make the whole tune flow more smoothly. Here's the first 2 bars being played with a slow metronome beat and a 2-bar introduction. Hopefully you noticed that for the second bar I placed the fingers down one at a time. Here that is again. Pay particular attention to how I put my fingers on the string. And here that is again, one last time. Right, moving on to the third bar, you'll notice that we're using exactly the same shape, but this time on the 3rd fret of the B string and the 4th fret of the G string. However, there's actually 2 ways of playing this. There's the original way and what I call the modern way. For the original way, the whole tune is in what's called first position. So the first finger plays the 1st fret, the second finger plays the 2nd fret, the third finger plays the 3rd fret, and the 4th finger plays the 4th fret. However, the modern way, you actually slide up and use fingers 1 and 2 to play this particular bar. I recommend you just trying both ways first and find the way that best suits your style of playing, and then stick with that. However, if you want to learn guitar as an academic subject and you want to learn to play correctly classically, use the 3rd and the 4th finger. Here's the first 3 bars being played at 40 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. I'll play it firstly using the 3rd and 4th finger, and then using the 1st and 2nd finger. Here it is with the 1st and 2nd finger. Before deciding which fingering style you're going to use to play bar 3, it's a good idea to learn bar 4 as well, so when you practice playing it, you're playing it in context. Now, bar 4 is really easy because it's exactly the same fingering as bar 1. However, you play a different bass note when you repeat the fingering pattern. Here's the complete first line being played at 40 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. Here that is again, using the modern fingering style. If you want to practice that with the metronome, I've put the metronome beats at 40 beats per minute, 50 beats per minute, 60 beats per minute and 65 beats per minute at the end of this video. However, it's worth me pointing out, when you do get the tune fluent, you don't need to use the metronome as it sounds a lot better without it. Here's line 1 one last time. Line 2 is a little more difficult to line 1 because you change fingering more frequently in this line. Let's take a look at bar 1 of line 2. The first 4 notes of the 5th bar are identical to the first 4 notes of the 1st bar. However, then you change by moving the 2nd finger to the 2nd fret of the B string. Here's what that sounds like at 40 beats per minute. Here that is again with a 2-bar introduction in case you want to try and play along. Right, let's move on to bar 2 of line 2. And I personally think this is the hardest bar to play, and that's because of the fingering. And to play this bar, you place the third finger in the third fret of the D string, then you play the fourth finger in the third fret of the B string, and finally the first finger in the first fret of the E string. However, to play the second half of the bar, you simply have to remove the third finger from the D string, exposing the open string. So here's that bar being played with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again, if you want to try and play along with me. You'll notice the chord names above the score, but you can ignore these really, as they're just there to help people who've been playing contemporary music for many years and have got a really highly developed muscle memory. Here's the first 2 bars of line 2 being played at 40 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again, if you want to play along. Right, let's take a look at bar 3 of line 2, where we place the first finger on the first fret of the B string and the second finger on the second fret of the D string. Then we move the first finger to the first fret of the G string, and you can play the third fret of the B string with either the third or fourth finger. Here that is being played at 40 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again. Now, bar 4 of line 2 doesn't take much explanation, as it's very similar to bar 4 of line 1. However, you just missed the last 3 notes. So, here's bar 3 and 4 of line 2 being played at 40 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again. Right, let's bring the whole of line 2 together and play the complete line. Here it is being played at 40 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again, so you can try playing along with it if you want to. What you're looking for when you're practicing this second line is a smooth flowing bass line. And this is particularly worth knowing if you're not using a metronome. You want the bass line to sound something like this. As you can hear, it's very melodic. Right, let's try bringing the first two lines together. So here they are at 40 beats per minute with a 2-bar introduction. Try and play along with it if you think you can. And here that is again with a 2-bar introduction. Right, so hopefully so far you understand the first half of the tune. Now let's take a look at the second half of the tune, starting with the third line. And we'll look at the complete line, because if you look at it, basically it's just finger picking chords, the same way we've done during this entire course. However, obviously you don't have to play complete chords if you don't want to. The first bar of line 3 is exactly the same as the first bar of the first line, so hopefully you already know how to play this. The second bar is almost a complete G7, however you don't need to play the second finger. And the third bar is a complete C. You'll see there, throughout this bar you actually play every note in an open C chord. And the final bar of this line, bar 4, is exactly the same as the second bar, where you almost play a complete G7. Right, let's take a look at the first and second bar of line 3. And the reason I've chosen to do 2 bars at once is because the way you change from the A minor to the G7 is quite important. And I would suggest you put down the first finger first, and then put down the third finger when you need it. And I'd play the G7 in the 4th bar of the third line in the same way. Here's the first 2 bars of line 3 being played with a 2-bar introduction. Take note of how I put the first finger down first on the second bar. And here that is again, if you want to try and play along with it. In bar 3, with the C, you want to just put the chord down normally, as you would when you usually play a C major. And bar 4 is literally a repeat of bar 2. So let's hear the entire line being played with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again, so you can try and play along with it if you think you're ready. And here's the third line, one last time at the same speed with a 2-bar introduction. let's move on to the final line, line 4. In a very similar fashion to line 2, line 4 is more difficult in that you've got to change to 2 chord shapes in every bar. So we'll look at this line bar by bar, starting with the first bar. And in this bar we go from a partial C to a partial G6. And this change is quite hard, so you might have to practice this bar on its own just for a while before you put it together with the rest of the line. Here's the first bar of line 4 being played with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again, if you want to try and play along with it. Right, we'll put that together with bar 2 straight away, and that's because bar 2 is very easy. You place the first finger on the first fret of the B string, and then halfway through the bar you place the third finger on the third fret of the A string to form the partial C. Here that is being played with a 2-bar introduction. Here that is again, so you can try and play along if you want to. The third bar of the last line is a little more difficult. The first half is easy enough because you just put the first finger on the first fret of the top E string. However, then you have to change to put the second finger on the second fret of the D string and the third finger or fourth finger, whichever you prefer, on the third fret of the B string. However, the last bar is identical to the last bar of the second line, so we can go straight into that. Here's the last 2 bars being played with a 2-bar introduction. And here that is again, in case you want to try and play along with it. Right, let's bring that together and play the whole last line. Here it is with a 2-bar introduction. Try and play along with it if you think you're ready. Here that is again with a 2-bar introduction in case you want to try and play along. Once you've got this tune, you don't really need to practice it with a metronome. In fact, I'd recommend you don't. However, with this line, in the same way we had to do with line 2, we want a nice smooth flow so you can hear the bass line clearly. Here's what that bass line should sound like. You can hear how important that bass line is to the tune. Right. Here's line 3 and line 4 with a 2-bar introduction. Try and play along with it if you think you can. And here that is again one last time. Finally, here's the whole tune being played all the way through, but without repeats. And here that is again in case you want to try and play along with it. However, if you're not ready yet, don't worry, you just need to use this as a practice routine and build up the speed over time. At the end of this tutorial, you'll find metronome beats at 40, 50, 60 and 65 beats per minute. So you can use those to try and build up the speed if you want to. If you've enjoyed this tutorial and you'd like to see more like it, please like, subscribe and hit the bell icon, and then you'll be notified when I upload new videos. And I do try to upload fairly regularly. And this tutorial is part of a course on fingerpicking, which you can find in my channel's playlists, but you can also find it at www.ebooks4guitar.com, and there you can find the tab for the whole Fingerstyle guitar course to view online for free. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.